While I've played first-person shooters starting all the way back with GoldenEye on the N64, I mostly focused on their single-player or cooperative modes, and I never really played competitive multiplayer for any significant length of time until 2017's Battlefront 2. So when EA announced Battlefield was returning to World War II in its fifth mainline installment, I was actually kind of excited. I've always loved the Second World War as a video game setting, and I was interested in seeing what a modern AAA title could do with the period. However, I didn't expect Battlefield 5 to entrench itself as part of my regular gaming routines, for better and for worse. Battlefield 5 can be broadly broken down into two main components, a cinematic single-player campaign and competitive online multiplayer. Together they add up to a fairly standard modern FPS, but the bulk of the game's value will come from spending time online blowing up player-controlled Nazis and Churchill tanks, rather than exploring the campaign. There is a practice range that can be entered solo, but as the name suggests, that mode is intended to help players fine-tune their shooting and piloting skills through various challenges. The campaign itself is a fairly compact 8 hours broken up into 4 distinct stories set in the European theater from 1942 to 1945. Every story varies in tone and style, but while they all have strong character performances, they overall vary wildly in quality, with Tirailleurs standing out as the clear best of the bunch. Part of the problem is rooted with how each story is rigidly structured around 3 missions, so it sometimes feels like there isn't enough time for the otherwise good actors to flesh out their characters. This is a particular issue for the second chapter, Nordlys, as Solveig's motivations and relationships with her mother, Astrid, go underexplored in favor of focusing on Astrid and Weber's metaphorical discussions about monsters. It's still a fine chapter, but its story is a bit bland and forgettable. Less forgettable, though not for the better, is the campaign's awkward use of stealth in each chapter. Battlefield 5 is built as a multiplayer FPS first and foremost, so the things that it gets right, namely weapon feel and large set-piece combat, translates beautifully to the campaign as well. However, the multiplayer doesn't have any kind of built-in stealth gameplay, so the mechanics needed to be added for the campaign. Unfortunately, these mechanics don't amount to much more than fairly basic alarm, sight, and sound systems. These systems amount to very rudimentary stealth gameplay that don't provide a lot of opportunities for improvisation when you get caught, so your only options are to enter a firefight or reset your progress and try a different approach. If you try for the former, you're going to face dumb as rocks AI that can be a little bullet spongy at times, while the latter approach will mostly see you combing the map for alternate routes rather than experimenting with new equipment or abilities to solve the problem in a radically different way. It's still a AAA shooter campaign, so I enjoyed the level of technical polish and competent mission design on display, even if it's not winning any Game of the Year awards on its own. Of course, the meat of Battlefield 5's content lies in its competitive multiplayer, so you'll get a lot more mileage out of your time with the game the more matches you play. 8 maps get reused across 6 different game modes that pits 32 to 64 players in team-based PvP. The large player counts make for a lot of fun chaos, especially when you throw in vehicles and destructible buildings into the mix. Helping to keep that chaos controlled and encourage team play is a fairly decent squad system that allows you to both respawn at any living squad mates, as well as allow you to revive any downed players in your squad regardless of your class. This does a lot to help you keep you in the action and close to the front lines. One player in the squad is also designated a squad leader, who can help direct things a little bit by designating certain objectives to attack or defend, while also calling in special reinforcements like artillery strikes or supplies. When it works, it feels like you and your squad are the stars of a World War II action blockbuster, heroically pushing the front lines for king and country. But a lack of strong communication tools means that you'll be at the mercy of your squad mates actually wanting to work together, rather than camping the same cliff overlooking the same objective the entire game. If that happens, Battlefield 5 becomes a crushingly lonely experience as you respawn, die, then spawn again. It's this frustrating low point that brings me closest to quitting Battlefield 5 altogether, but thankfully it doesn't happen often enough to offset the best this game has to offer. Something that would also keep my frustration at bay is a less grindy progression system. Battlefield 5 has a hybrid system that uses levels, quests, and an in-game currency called Company Coin to keep the player engaged. Weapons and gadgets get split between 4 classes and are unlocked by leveling each class independently. Leveling up also unlocks special quests that award cosmetics you can share between classes. Furthermore, there's a player rank that awards character customization, vehicles, and company coins. And on top of all of that are even more level tracks for every weapon and vehicle that unlocks perks, cosmetics, and quests. It's a heaping pile of progress bars bars that mostly take time and patience to fill without any real way to speed up the progress, since quests award either cosmetics or company coins. Speaking of quests, they range from fun tests of skill to frustrating brick walls impossible to surmount, but I overall really appreciate their attempt at encouraging players to vary their playstyle in exchange for a reward. Less appreciated is the role company coins play in the progression system. Coins are the only way you can purchase weapons and vehicle upgrades, as well as the primary way you unlock cosmetics. And this is by itself fine, but the rate of acquiring coins is painfully slow. Because of a bug, you're not actually able to earn post-game coin after you hit rank 50, so you're limited to earning 300 coins per day through quests. Compare this to the over 2,000 coins required to fully upgrade a single weapon, and it's pretty clear that this economy has some severe bottlenecks. To be fair, hitting rank 50 will earn you around 24,000 coin, but that's still not enough to fully upgrade every weapon and vehicle, and it's not even enough to fully unlock 2 cosmetic sets for your guns. Luckily, there's no way to buy cosmetics or upgrades through microtransactions, so this system isn't maliciously egregious, but locking away the majority of cosmetics behind this coin grind is a particular bummer because it's my favorite part of the game. I'm a huge sucker for player customization because it's an easy way to breathe in a lot of life and character into a game if done right, and what's the point of blowing up Nazis if you can't do it in style? And that's really the only thing holding back Battlefield 5's multiplayer. The gameplay is rock solid and feels like a modern throwback to the game that kicked off DICE's story to history, so I give the latest installment in the franchise a 1942 out of 5.
Stop the presses!
Okay, cool, so they just released a roadmap, and looky here, a lot of the game modes and features they announced at E3 will get released over the next 4 months. On the one hand, the game is out now, and it's important to give people purchasing advice at the start when the game is at its most expensive. On the other hand, I've never released a review on time, and the full version of this game as advertised won't actually exist until Firestorm is released. There are going to be plenty of major reviews out there at the start, but none of them will actually be updated to reflect the state of the game in March, and that feels kind of unfair, so I'll start over and give the review another shot when the whole thing is released.
Smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away.
I'm not actually going to start over, but I am going to have to update my impressions as a result of the new content, beginning with some of the new game modes. First of all, Combined Arms is garbage. It's a game mode built around cooperative play, but lacks any kind of matchmaking and is populated by simple AI at home in a GoldenEye 64 clone. I don't have any friends who play Battlefield 5, so I was only able to try and tackle this game mode by myself. It doesn't play well solo, and you'll end up facing a whole bunch of cheap deaths, even on easy. It's a huge bummer because I was hoping Combined Arms is going to be a fun and casual escape from competitive multiplayer. Early on, when I was frustrated with my crappy performance in Breakthrough or Conquest, but I still wanted to play the game, I would jump into the campaign as a way to unwind. However, I eventually beat the campaign, so I would end up just quitting for the night instead. I think more than anything, the game needs an accessible and casual cooperative mode that can help onboard new players into the competitive experience, while also giving hardcore players something to do besides grind each other to dust. And DICE recognizes the importance of variety too, because they decided to run special game modes for a limited time. Both Squad Conquest and Rush were a lot of fun to play when they showed up, and I hope that they return soon, but they also revealed a weakness with Battlefield 5 overall. Most of the game modes are just variations on a theme and have a hard time setting themselves apart from each other. Each mode will have some combination of blowing up an objective, capturing an objective, or wiping out the enemy team, while also sharing the same 9 maps between them. It's not that every mode feels the same in the heat of the moment, it's just that the differences that they do have don't help the mode stand out. It's especially obvious because both Squad Conquest and Rush feel like a better balanced or smoother play experience than their base game counterparts Domination and Breakthrough respectively. And it's too bad that the former were limited time events because I would have loved for them to replace their counterparts and become permanent. Of course, the complaint that I wanted the new modes to stick around longer means that they're definitely doing something right, and that's worth celebrating. Also worth celebrating are all the improvements they made to progression. In addition to fixing the end of match glitch, DICE made sure to backpay everyone for their missing coin, which is a wonderful gesture. They also made a new series of repeatable quests that award anywhere from 200 to 400 coin and unlock as you play the game. These quests do a lot to not only alleviate some of the grind, but also encourages people to try to out different playstyles or set personal goals for each match. But the real triumph of these content updates, and the one feature that keeps me coming back to play every week, are the Tides of War chapters. Part progress bar, part framing device, Tides of War can be thought of as Battlefield 5's take on the season passes that are fairly common in the Battle Royale genre. But unlike those mostly free-to-play games, each Tide of War chapter is fully available to every player of Battlefield 5, so you don't have to spend any extra money. The chapters themselves can be divided into two main parts. The first is a chapter rank, which, while like your player rank, awards cosmetics you can immediately apply to your squad. The second part is the weekly challenge. The challenge is a special series of quests that each award you chapter experience, and finishing all or most of the quests in a weekly challenge will also reward you with a new cosmetic, vehicle, or weapon. When combined, these two systems actually make for some really satisfying progression on their own. The quests themselves aren't too hard to complete and while still rewarding you for playing well, and because of the award experience, climbing the chapter rank feels very quick. The only downside to this system is that the weekly challenges in chapter rank are only available for a limited time. The rewards stick around and can be bought for company coin, but the quests as well as chapter rank go away when their time is up. That's fine if you're like me and can play every weekend without skipping a beat, but if you work through the weekend or are out of time, then it might feel like the chapter rank in Tides of War are just another unfair grind. Luckily, the weapons and vehicles are actually relatively cheap to buy, so players shouldn't feel too bad about missing those weeks. It's just obscenely expensive cosmetic rewards that'll feel like a real kick in the pants. Overall, this system is fantastic, and I probably would have quit a long time ago if Tides of War didn't exist. But now let's talk about Firestorm. It's a new battle royale introduced in chapter 6. Oh no. They released another roadmap, didn't they? This review is never coming out, huh? Okay, so obviously waiting has backfired, and now my review is just going to be awkwardly late for an arbitrary reason. So I'm cutting it off here at chapter 3 and para-jumping headfirst into Firestorm.
So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song.
Firestorm is Battlefield 5's take on the Battle Royale genre, and I'm going to be totally honest. Beyond a couple of times playing Apex Legends with a friend, I don't actually have enough experience in the genre to confidently review it on those terms. But I'm not entirely sure that's the right way to go about it anyways. In doing a little bit of research, I noticed that while dedicated battle royales like Apex Legends and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds will make everything center around a single mode, and games with multiple game modes like Fortnite and Black Ops will silo off their battle royale option through separate progression systems that don't fully overlap with the rest of the game's multiplayer, Battlefield 5 chooses to fully integrate Firestorm into its core progression. This means that Firestorm isn't some kind of bonus game you get with the purchase of Battlefield 5 that makes its own demands on the player for their time, but an equal part of the multiplayer experience alongside Conquest and Grand Operations. As a result, it's criminally unfair to single out Firestorm for comparison against dedicated battle royales like Apex Legends, when it's actually one of many multiplayer options available when you purchase Battlefield 5. If you're looking to be exclusively catered to by Firestorm, then you're going to walk away disappointed. But if you're looking to add variety to your multiplayer experience that doesn't take away from all the work you already put in, Firestorm is exactly the kind of content you're looking for. Whereas I complained earlier about how most of the original game modes in Battlefield 5 felt awkwardly similar and sometimes redundant, the nature of Firestorm throws the core shooting vehicle and equipment mechanics into a blender alongside a beautiful new map called Halvoy, a wall of fire, and a janky loot system. This transforms Battlefield 5 into a smooth puree of hectic scavenging and brutally tense fights. If the base game's multiplayer is like Saving Private Ryan, then Firestorm is The Revenant. And while I'm still looking for a fun cooperative PvE experience to round things out, Firestorm has added the kind of radically different play rhythms that I think this game needs to focus on for its future game modes. That's a pretty big deal, and even if these 4 months of content haven't been uniformly great, it would be disingenuous of me to say that Battlefield 5 hasn't materially improved from all the work DICE has put in so far. Now, it could be Stockholm Syndrome from all the time I put into it to iron out this review, but I have grown fond of the game even after all of my initial frustrations with it. As a result, I now give the latest installment of the Battlefield franchise a Road to Rome out of 5. Oh, and by the way, so this whole live service trend has been both kinda great and a huge pain in the ass. On the one hand, games now get more stuff stapled onto them over the course of months or years. On the other, it feels like more of these games are suffering from troubled development cycles and releasing in at worst broken, but usually okay states. Couple that with new experiments in monetization, streaming, and digital storefronts, and we enter into this weird transitionary period built on digital sand that'll wash away into the ocean once the servers go dark. Unfortunately, a lot of AAA publishers in the industry don't don't seem able or willing to actually invest their dragon's hoard of resources into changing their production practices, or at least provide their development companies with the guidance they need to stay on top of this new wave of change. Even the games media hasn't quite kept up with these changes, and heck, part of the framing for this video revolves around most game reviews going from reliable judgments that can be reasonably referenced years after a game's release into perishable pieces of analysis only able to describe a piece of software that no longer exists. In fact, in the time it took me to record and edit this video, Battlefield 5 released a new update that added a whole bunch of cosmetics as well as microtransactions. This update also prevents top-level or epic cosmetics from being purchasable in the free-to-play currency company coin. It's a massively disappointing bummer, even if lower-level cosmetics can still be unlocked, and it doesn't actually change my updated impression. I just hate that a pretty significant change happened and it gets buried in a rant after I give my final score. I hate that this review is outdated even before I could finish it. I hate how exhausting it is to keep up with it all. And I hate how hella unfair it is to the developers whose works and reputations are going to be anchored to the initial impression of games media and enthusiasts. Now, one way developers avoided this in the past was through premium content updates like large DLC or full expansion packs, and often the media would report and treat the extra content as an entirely new game. This also meant that the original review could serve as a kind of historical reference, while the review of the new content could stand in as an updated recommendation. As a result, it was actually pretty rare for expansions or DLC to arrive alongside free updates that provided anything more than minor quality of life improvements. If they did, as was the case for Diablo 3's launch of Reaper of Souls, then the developers would get a second chance at a first impression through the expansion, but the base game would be stuck with its original reputation because people wouldn't know that those original reviews are describing an entirely different game. But that strategy only works for premium release cycles, so games like Destiny are able to recover from rocky starts and rehabilitate their reputation, but games like Battlefront 2 that choose to release a steady stream of content for free have a tougher mountain to climb. This is partly because it's a bit wasteful for a media outlet to go back and update its review for every little update that can happen to a game. Most media outlets actually do their best to report on the release of the new content and occasionally dive into a new game mode, but in the time between Battlefield 5's release and my review, over 100 new games released, and that's not counting the Steam asset flips. Something has got to give, and prioritizing the release of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and Yoshi's Crafted World over a random update in last year's World War II FPS is the exact same thing I would do in any review editor's shoes. And tragically, not every update is necessarily worth updating a review for. Even after a year of updates, I stand by my initial review of Battlefront 2 because it's only changed in ways that keep me hopeful for its future while still leaving me a little bit unsatisfied. The game actually looks kind of similar to what it did a year ago, but with more Clone Wars heroes and cosmetics. Obviously, that's still worth talking about, but it's weird to spend a lot of time re-reviewing a game just to reach the same conclusion. Especially if I reach the same conclusion after the game addresses some of the review's earlier criticisms, which is the case for Command & Conquer Rivals. That game added a lot of systems to help alleviate some of the awkward ladder balance issues, but it's still a grindy mess that also happens to be one of the most perfect RTS adaptations I've ever played. Now, it may seem kind of weird that I'm focusing on reviews so much, because if journalists are still willing to cover content releases with the occasional dive into new stuff, that should be fine, right? But unfortunately, the game review is a privileged piece of media that has an exceptionally high amount of influence in how both a game is received at release and remembered after launch. No other kind of games media is aggregated in the same way through dedicated websites like Metacritic. Developer bonuses were never tied to trending on social media. Review bombs wouldn't be a thing if reviews didn't matter. Whether you think that's a good or bad thing doesn't matter, it's just the truth. What's important is making sure that reviews are best able to serve everyone affected, from developers looking for ways to improve their game to curious enthusiasts who just want to know what's up with the game that they're interested in. What's great is that it isn't some sort of hopeless thing, or that reviews need to be entirely retooled. There are some fairly concrete ways in which the whole weird mess can be sorted out. On the media side, they just need to keep doing what they're doing. The major sites all continue their coverage of the bigger live service games while also providing their opinions on new content. It's great, but often this post-release coverage is buried under all the news and reviews for other games. Doing some hopefully light website redesigns could help link those updated impression pieces back towards the original review and make them more prominent. Clearly signal that the game is an ongoing live service and that the review only reflects the game at launch, while all these other articles better represent the game as it is now. This could also be a way to use the review as a springboard for all kinds of site coverage like podcasts or live streams and bring more traffic its way. And I'm not only talking about relying on the algorithms currently in place to suggest new articles to the reader. I'm talking about something curated by a human hand. In a similar vein, the review aggregators can put in the work to collect up-to-date impressions on their live service games. Places like Metacritic are already purpose-built to collect links to reviews from other websites, and while making room for post-review content will require some user experience work, if your site is going to be used by publishers to make financial decisions and shut down studios or greenlight certain projects, then you owe it to the industry to have accurate and up-to-date impressions. But relying on major games media websites to change their layouts is a pretty tall order, and a little unfair. Most games aren't actually live services, and the way things are now works kind of really well for most all indie and AAA games. Dedicating more resources to games with unknown shelf lives and constantly shifting quality doesn't have the return on investment worth chasing after unless it's part of some kind of broader site rework. If the communities built around a live service want all of the updates and quality of life impressions to actually influence the way the game is perceived outside of its hardcore player base, then they're going to need to build a website that gathers up all that extra coverage for itself. And I'm not talking about wikis, which just collect the information in the game, or community spaces like Reddit, which help people connect with each other, but a kind of evolution of the good old-fashioned fan site that collects all of the articles, guides, and discussions about the game. Something that doesn't necessarily focus on producing its own original content, but also acts as a kind of archive for the breadth of content scattered around the web. That way, curious outsiders and lapsed veterans have a place to find up-to-date information in the game, as well as to see what everyone who's still hooked on it think about the current state of the game. This site could also serve as a kind of common ground for creators to share their work instead of relying on Twitch or YouTube's capricious algorithms and discovery features. It doesn't have to be too expensive either. Being a sort of discovery hub means you can link back to where the content is originally hosted, with backup copies or original content being something the site's worked up to as it's able to stand on its own. Most importantly, it allows for a community built up around a live service style game to document its own history. Multiplayer games in general, but live service games in particular, have a tendency to give birth to tight-knit and long-lived communities that change over time. These communities develop their own languages and rituals while also providing a way for people to connect through play. Once the service goes dark, however, all of that is lost to memory, with the humble game review the only easily accessible evidence the game existed at all. And that's kinda sad. Thanks for watching.